Alright, so once you have gone through the process and you have Ableton installed on your computer, this is going to be the very first screen that you see when you open the program up. Now Ableton has two different views, and this very first view right here, you'll notice that there are a couple of different columns over here. These will be called channels, and the rows following from left to right, those would be considered the clips. Now, the two different views in Ableton would be over here. This is the session view. And when you hit tab on your keyboard, or when you click up here, it switches over to the arrangement view. And pretty much how it works is when you are in the session view, if you're recording different MIDI parts or you're recording different audio parts, you can take them from over here and move them into your arrangement to arrange your song. But let's go back over to the main screen, and I want to go ahead and get started with the different options up here. Now, as with any other computer programs, when you click on the file option, it will give you the option to open up a new set. You can open up another live set. Over here it gives you recent sets, so you can open up recent projects, which is very convenient. And we also have the option to save our sets right here. And once we are finished saving our project, we also have the option to export a song by doing export audio or video. There's another option over here, which is called collect all and save. And if you're planning on moving a project from a computer to another computer or sending it to a friend, that feature right there will be able to save all of your files into one place, and then once it gets sent over, that person will be able to access them whenever they want. Now over here within the edit menu, these are the different features that you'll be using when you're editing with MIDI or audio, which we will discuss in a further chapter. Going up over here is the create panel, and within here you can do a couple different tasks, such as insert another audio channel. So if we go ahead and do that, it'll create another channel up there. You can also insert another MIDI channel by doing the same thing. And aside from that, you also have the option to create a return channel right here. And we will also be discussing this in more detail within another lesson. And to the right of your return channels is your master channel. And this essentially is where each one of these channels are currently being routed to. So if you look over here among all these different channels, they're being played and they come out of the master channel. So let's go back over here. You also have the view option, which toggles on all of the different features that you have within Ableton. So over here, these are all checked out. You have the in outs, the sends, the returns, and the mixer, which are all these things over here. You can also go ahead and toggle them on and off right here, which is essentially the same thing as clicking over here. So it makes it very convenient. You have all these different features opened up on the side. And if you want a little bit more information on what they are, once you hover over them, this little feature right here is called Info View. This is very important because if you don't ever know what something is within the program, it will tell you right here. So for example, when I scroll over this one right here, if you look on the bottom left hand side under the Info View, it lets you know that that is a track activator, and there's a short description of what that feature is. So the software is really cool. If you hover over anything at all, it just automatically tells you what it is down here in the Info View. So that is very useful, and I would recommend using that whenever you are confused about something. The next option that is up here is called actually options, and within here you can control different parameters. Like I mentioned before, you can go over here to the Info View to see what everything does. because there's a lot of different things that you can get into. But what I want to get into is the preferences. And when you click on the preferences, these are going to be the different things that control how your software is laid out. So if we go to the very first one up here, you can just kind of go through everything and configure it. What I think is important on this page would be your zoom display to determine how big everything is. So depending on your eyesight, you can adjust that. I like to keep mine at 115 based on how far the monitors are away from my face when I'm editing. Another thing you can look on here is the theme. I don't know about you guys, but I find myself to be a little bit of a night owl. Oftentimes I like to work late at night or early in the morning. And because of that, the theme that I picked was dark. I believe by default, it is going to be the mid-light setting right here, which if you're working really late at night and it's dark outside, it kind of hurts your eyes after a while. So what I went ahead and did is I just switched over to the dark setting. And what's really cool about this is you can go online and you can adjust your settings and you can actually build your own skin for the software. And another thing you can do is you can adjust the brightness to be darker or lighter based on your preferences. I keep mine at 100 and I think that's fine for me. So the other thing that is really important is the audio setting. And the reason that this is important, it is based on the hardware or software that you are using. So for me personally, I have an audio interface which is connected to my computer. And what an audio interface does is it takes your audio signal from, whatever you're recording, whether it's a microphone or an instrument, and it turns it into a type of like language that your computer can read. And what else it does, it takes your song out of the software and it also finds a way to change that coding into music, and then the music comes out of your interface in the form of your speakers. So I have two monitors, they're Yamaha HS7s, and they're both connected to my interface. That is how I hear my music. So underneath the driver type, I pick Audio because that is the sound driver that the Yamaha Steinberg USB audio would be using. And that is the interface that I have selected right now. I also have a smaller Focusrite USB, and now it's not connected, so you're going to get an error message. But when I'm using the other interface for my second pair of monitors, that's what I would select. And what's good to know about this screen is your input configuration. Over here, I have two different inputs onto my interface. And what an input is, it's just like a cable. So for example, on the left side, I have a microphone connected right now. And on the right side, I have my guitar pedal connected so I can record guitar. And they're usually connected at all times. So I can go ahead and record either one of them whenever I want to because they're always plugged in. And over here on the output configuration, this corresponds to the speakers that are on the back of the interface. So I have a cable running from my interface into my monitors, and this is how it is configured. Now when it comes to the hardware setup, there's a couple different things that you should know. Over here, the buffer size, you can see there's a range. It goes as low as 32 samples to about 2,400 or 2,048 samples. So basically what this does, it controls the input latency. And if you're wondering what latency is, the way that I can explain it, it's the distance or time that it takes for an audio signal to reach your computer from the actual source. So say you're recording a guitar and you strum a note. If you have a very low latency, you'll hear your guitar come out of the speakers very quickly. If you have a large buffer size of 2,048 samples and you do the same thing, you would hit the guitar and then there would be a couple seconds of delay before you hear the guitar come out of your speakers. And here is why this works really well and why you should know what it means. Over here, the buffer size, I just moved it back down to about 256 samples. If I have it set up at a low latency like that, that means that when I'm recording, it's really easy to record my guitar and hear it being played back through the monitors. But once you have a lot of different plugins and a lot of different audio channels running and your computer is working really hard, if your buffer size is very low, it's going to make your computer skip and certain parts are not going to play properly. So what you're going to have to do is increase your buffer size. And if you're working on a song and you have a lot of different things going on, if you have a very high buffer size, that means the audio will play without skipping and it will sound better. But the takeaway and the trade-off for that is that you're going to have a lot of latency. So based on the specific application of what you're doing, that is how you adjust the buffer size. Right off the bat, since you're not doing too much, 256 is a good place to start. And once you start adding more things, and if your computer starts running slowly, so if you look up here, the CPU usage, if that's a very high percentage, that is when you would have to increase your buffer size so your computer can process. Now, on to the next step when it comes to sample rate. The default setting of 44 kilohertz is pretty good. You can leave this how it is, don't worry about that. The latency is what we were talking about in the hardware setup, and that is exactly what is reflected down here. Now, the driver error compensation, if you want to adjust this, usually you would turn it up or you would turn it down. And what that does, it would change the time in which the signal would be coming out of your monitors. When it comes to the test tone, what this is for is if you are having difficulties connecting hardware to your setup, you would use this option right here to test the tone. And what it does, it creates a simple sine wave that comes out of your monitors so you can start troubleshoot the problem and figure out where the signal stops. And this is what it sounds like. Another thing that I would like to point out is I also have a computer monitor or a computer screen hooked up to my Ableton. If I ever want to use the speakers on that instead of my studio monitors, I would go to this option right here and select the input. Or I'm sorry, I would select the output of my audio. So that's how you would do that. And then instead of going to the hardware setup, you would adjust your output buffer size right here. So you can just drag that number up and down. But since I'm using my monitors for the most part, we're just going to go over to that. Alright, so when it comes to different MIDI instruments, a MIDI instrument would be something like this. Now this over here is the Novation Launchpad, and what that means is all of these different buttons can be mapped out to different keys on whatever instrument you're using, and you can go ahead and record yourself playing different instruments on this pad right here. What I'm going to go ahead and do is switch over to Ableton and show you how we can do this. Now for most controllers, a lot of times you can just plug them in and they're ready to play. If they're not like that, you would have to go online and find a specific driver for that controller. So I plugged in my keyboard, and if you take a look inside the preferences, you can see that the input automatically gets put in there. So my controller is called the Master Key 61, and currently I have the track feature on. What the track feature means is that any single time that I play a note on my keyboard, it will be registered within a software. So if you look over here, this little red button right here is how you arm different channels to record. So if I want to play or record MIDI channel 1, I will click on that button, and if you look to the right of it, you can see those little yellow dots coming up. It's an indication of how loud you are playing the instrument. So if I press the key very lightly, it will come out like that. If I press it really hard, it goes all the way up. So that's what the track feature does. When you do the sync feature right here, that means that your instrument will be synchronized with Ableton. And what that means is if you have your BPM, which is your tempo, set up here at 120 beats per minute, your instrument will also be tuned to that speed or tempo of the song. Now when it comes to remote over here, that means you can use your controller as a remote to control Ableton. So for example, right here, I have a couple different buttons like the up, down, left, and right, and then the user buttons in the mixer, and then a couple different features over here to control different parameters. This launchpad made by Novation is made specifically for Ableton, so you can use this to remotely control Ableton. Super cool. Alright, on to the next step over here. We're going to go talk about the plugins folder. And how the plugins folder works over here is this is where you're going to be picking the location of all of your plugins. So there's a difference of VST2 and VST3 plugins with Ableton 10. When you're installing your plugin, it will tell you which type it is. But what I like to do is I like to make a custom folder for my plugins. And this is the location of my plugins folder right here for my VST2 plugins, and this is my location for my VST3 plugins. Once we talk about file optimization, you will pick those files based on where they're saved on your computer, whether it's your hard drive or if it's your laptop or if it's somewhere on your PC, and that is how you would choose it. So on top of that, you also have your recording and all these other features. I think they're good how they are. If you want to have a little bit more hands-on and a little bit more variety with that, you can go ahead and do that, but I think they're fine how they are. And the very last option would be licenses. Since you're having a trial version right now, you would just go ahead and keep it how it is, not worry about that for now.